Welcome to Leaders in the Arena. My name is Jenny Whitener, and I'm the CEO of Bridge Innovate. We were founded back in 2003 as a certified women-owned business, and we focus on teaming with our clients to help them innovate their business, build leadership capacity, and organize and execute change. This podcast is designed to share valuable insights and lessons from our clients and our network to support your growth journey. Thanks for listening in today. According to a recent article from McKinsey & Company, a further differentiator of growth for leaders is their ability to build organizational buy-in, including from the board and their investors. This is especially true for nonprofit organizations, which rely on investment from the board and leadership and stakeholders generally as they enable their growth. What are some of the recommendations and tips for getting the board involved in strategic planning? And what are some of the tips for the leadership team as they begin to articulate and imagine a new strategy and mobilize that? Today, we have the opportunity for a very special guest to join us, Jessica Whatley. She serves as the CEO for Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Greater Chattanooga. Over the past 5 years, she's utilized her unique skill set in capital, campaign management, organizational leadership, and nonprofit board development to guide the Big Brothers Big Sisters organization toward fulfilling its mission. Today, we want to talk to her more about how she's doing that. Their mission is to create and support one-to-one mentoring relationships that ignite the power and promise of youth, something that's very inspiring for us to begin the conversation with in 2024. We've had the privilege of working alongside Jessica and her team on strategic planning, and we are thrilled that she is here with us today. Jessica, anything else that you would share with the audience for them to get to know you a bit more?
Oh, just well, thank you, Jenny. Excited to be here. Yeah, I mean, I've been here next month in February in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in this role for 5 years, but I've been with Big Brothers Big Sisters for over a decade. I started working with Big Brothers Big Sisters in 2013. And so it's really just become kind of my life's work. I say a lot. It's a long time. You don't see people stay in jobs that long anymore. So it's a great place to be a part of.
That's great. So it's so exciting to have you here. I can say that when we were involved together and working through your strategic plan, and I want to go to some questions in just a moment. You know, there's this aspect of you that we've all heard of Big Brothers and Big Sisters. At least I have for many, many decades. It's been a part of comfort that to know in our community that there's this organization that really comes around youth with a mentor to support them. But getting closer to your organization was fabulous, and to understand the real power that you're bringing to our community. So first, let me just say thanks for all the work you and your team do for the youth in our community.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, let's go on and start our conversation around strategic planning. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts as the CEO, executive director, around the highlights of strategic planning and what nonprofits need to think about as they're launching that kind of project.
Yeah, I remember when we were first talking about strategic planning a few years ago for the agency. One thing is, as a part of a national organization, we're required to have a strategic plan, which is great for us because it forces us to do what every agency should have to do anyway. But I remember sitting with a board member 5 years ago, and one thing we talked about was how it gives us the freedom to say no to things, because it's so easy in an organization to be like, we need to do this and we need to do this, and there's so many things, and that's all great. But if we're trying to do all of those things, we tend to do a couple of them well and a lot of them not very well. And so that was one of the big pieces for us, was it said, hey, what is the most important? What rises to the top that we need to focus on so that we can best serve our kids and our families? And so that was really just the kind of push to get something in place, was the freedom of what should we do and what should we not do right now. Doesn't mean we don't do it later, but we don't do it right now.
Right. Great call out. And I think great advice for other leaders, because I think so often they see the strategic plan as additive, like
Mhm.
adding to the day-to-day work. And I think the perspective that you're sharing is use it as a way to create prioritization, to
Mhm.
establish kind of those things that are most important and get your team rallied around that. One of the
100%.
things that was really different about how we teamed up on your strategic plan was the use of a journey map, a user journey map, and bringing that human-centric perspective into that day-to-day experience analysis of how big brothers and big sisters engage with the organization. Talk to me a little bit about how you experience that process, the user journey map, and how that user view might have been a benefit to your organization through the strategic planning process.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody who was a part of the process would probably tell you that was the most beneficial piece of the whole thing. Everything was beneficial, but really taking a look back and imagining, okay, it's easy in the day to day for us to see how we think a process looks like, and we know the requirements of the process in the back end. But someone, whether for us it's a volunteer or a family member or parent signing up a kid going through that process, that is really important to us to know how they feel because they don't know what our policies on the back end are and why something may be longer than they think it should be. And so really trying to figure out how are they feeling during each of these areas and steps that we make them go through. And so one of the cool things that you and your team did was we talked about like what kind of measured how do they feel at each of those areas. Is that a high point? Is that just kind of a neutral? Is that a low point? And where can we kind of capitalize on those high points as well, which was huge. And then that tool for us, like it's been amazing. We've talked about, oh gosh, we should do this for everything. Like, how does a donor feel through the process? How does a board member feel through the process? How does a staff? But it was especially helpful to start with volunteers because we're not an organization that has paid staff as mentors. This is not employees who are getting paid to do any of these things. It's a volunteer. So how they feel really matters because if they're not enjoying it, why would they do it?
Right. Very well said. And, one of the things I felt was so exciting about working with you and your team was how you guys were so open to embracing new tools. And that even after we went through that first user journey map for volunteers for the bigs that might be coming in, you're like, we should do this for others, the other
Mhm.
stakeholders in our organization. And you immediately challenged the team to do that. So just that whole aspect of learn quickly, apply, and grow, that was an additional, I think, outcome of the strategic plan that you guys just began to use new tools in your day-to-day leadership.
100%. We're doing them next week with another tool that you used, using it in our staff planning meeting. So that's been one of the extra wins.
Good. That's great. That's great to hear. One of the things I observed about when we teamed up was that you were very dedicated to ensuring that your board was involved in the strategic planning process. And I think that's always a question for nonprofit leaders is what is the right engagement of the board of directors? Can you talk a little bit about that? What your perspective is about board involvement and any tips that you would provide other nonprofit leaders?
Yeah, I think that's interesting because actually yesterday in my email, I got an article about a board. And like if they don't really have something that they can get excited and get behind, then they're not going to be dedicated board members either. But a few years ago, and this is probably one of the best things we did, is we created a lot of boards have these old fashioned committees. And we created a committee on our board we call it the Long Range and Strategic Planning Committee. And that's their role is they help us find a partner, put together a strategic plan, and then monitor that that plan is being accomplished. We report back to them on that. So I think having that it's not necessarily always the full board. Of course, the full board's going to be involved in some capacity, but having that committee that can really get behind it. And then for us, the chair of that committee, who was our past president and is now our president, just being a champion of the strategic plan and the process, we needed that because it's great for me to be a champion, but for at the board level to have another peer who is saying, hey, here's what's being done, here's the work that's happening, and then kind of really, celebrating our team a little bit with the board, saying, hey, here's all the hard work that these people that we've hired to do this work are doing on the back end, instead of me standing up there saying, look at all this work we're doing on the back end. It was great for Kimberly, who was kind of our board champion, to be able to do that.
Right, right. So it's really good point. It sounds like it creates a greater degree of almost intimacy of really
Mhm.
deeply understanding, what the staff is going through and the struggles they face, and then also provides the board, the smaller committee, an opportunity to weigh in, bring their perspective, bring their ideas and their insights from their own experiences to team up with you and kind of that way to craft that strategic plan. I also find it really great that you identified the chair as your next president, right? Because the
Mhm.
strategic plan is that guiding instrument for the next generation of work for the entity. And so by the fact that she was a part of the process from the beginning and then moved into that senior leadership role as the board chair, she's ready. She's aligned
Hmm.
with you now, and she was a part of that process. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah.
Tell me about, you talked a little bit about the board, but tell me about how you got your team involved. I mean, they're the ones who are on
Yeah.
the front line executing all this change. So talk to me about tips on engaging the leadership team of the nonprofit.
Yeah. I mean, part of it was y'all. I can't say that enough. Like, but I will say hire the right people. I think that's huge is hire people who are open to strategy and who are open to being innovative and thinking of new ideas. So I think, of course, work with the team you have, but when you have the opportunity to bring on new people into those leadership roles, look for those strategic thinkers because that makes a huge difference when you get into a process like this. I also think one of the things we tried really hard to do is I remember our first conversation about like when I kind of really cast the vision of what I think needs to be some of our focus areas for the next couple of years is it kind of divided itself among our leadership team's current bodies of work, which
Mhm.
was really important. And then one of the things you all had them do was they did the research. So I cast this vision of, hey, here's where I think this is where we're finding kind of stumbling blocks and struggles in our mission, but then they went out and did the research and came back with loads of ideas. And so that gave them buy in because they brought that back instead of me just saying, hey, here is the ideas. Now you go create deliverables around it,
Right.
which was huge in them having that buy in into the process. And they're just, I mean, I'm lucky we have an amazing team, which
Right.
helped that too, as well.
I agree. You do have an amazing team.
They're
And
great.
I think there are two things I want to just point out about what you just shared. One is that the group, I could tell in working with them, felt a high degree of, kind of a buzzword today is psychological safety, meaning
Hmm.
they were very open. They were very open to exploring. They're very open to reimagining. There were no sacred cows. There was no defending. And I really point to your leadership for setting that culture with the team. And as you said, bringing in the right people who are committed to your mission for whatever that means. If it means reconstructing their area or expanding something, they were open to it because they were so committed to the vision and the
Yeah.
mission that you set. The other thing that I think was really important for that leadership team is interesting that you brought out this point about them conducting the research. We toy with that back and forth as a consultancy because we could go do that for you. And in
Hmm.
some, especially our for-profit clients, they'll say, "Oh, Bridge, just go do the scanning and the benchmarking and all that
Hmm.
for us." But then we become inspired. We
Hmm.
know the insights that are happening across the industry, not the client.
Yeah.
And so I think it's interesting that you pull that out, and I'm hopeful that that level of curiosity continues for your team at the right level. I mean, I know they're running
Hmm.
the business every day, but that if they hit a point of problem, if they hit an impasse, they'll say, well, how are others doing this?
Hmm.
What inspiration can we get by looking outside? And I hope that becomes a pattern that will equip them in today's kind of very high disruptive, high speed environment. So that was really fun
Yeah,
sharing that.
it was.
Generally, strategic planning can be really stressful for organizations. Do you have kind of a top three recommendations for success for your leaders in the arena?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is a good partner. Like, I was continuously amazed at how you would tell we were there for a couple hours and you give us this agenda of what all we're going to get done. And I would look at it and be like, I'd laugh. I'd be like, no way, we're not getting all that done today. That's impossible. So I think that is really important. And it's also challenged us when I plan things, like things don't have to take as long as I think they do. Like we can, like for next week, one of the activities we're doing is similar to what you all did with us is like, hey, let's spend 8 minutes brainstorming an idea. We don't have to spend an hour brainstorming an idea. Let's just spit out what we can in a quick amount of time. And then I think like a good team, which I've already mentioned, like I'm really fortunate. We've built a great team who are open to change and want to improve processes so that we can better do our mission. And so I guess after that, like being open to change, I think we all need to. I hope someone, if I ever get to this point, reminds me of that and just says, like, hey, no, like getting away from the it's always been done this way, or we tried that before and it didn't work, that just constantly having that mindset because the world changes so much that an idea that may have been a not great idea 2 years ago is now a great idea, or because something didn't work in the past doesn't mean it doesn't work now. So just that, like, really being open to change and having that safe environment where people can come up with any idea and nobody's just we're not gonna all look at you like you're crazy if it doesn't seem like the best idea to us. I
Mhm.
think those are kind of the main things that stick out to me.
Yeah, really great. I mean, this concept of having a good partner, having the right team, and then being open to change. I love the three areas. On the change bit, one of the things I
Mhm.
just want to kind of do a follow-up question on that because the interesting part for you, Jessica, is that you talked about in your opening is that you have, over a decade with Big Brothers and Big
Yeah.
Sisters, right? And many, even for-profit organizations, they struggle with the fact that when leaders have a long-term tenure with an entity, they seem to get stuck. They get
Mhm.
stuck in imagining things. That's not your case. You're saying, let's be open to change. It's just part of your mantra. You bring that to your leadership approach. How do you do that? How do how do you bring that mindset to the table every day for your team?
Yeah. Oh, my husband would tell you it's because I can't function unless there's a big thing change going on that I'm not great with status quo.
Okay.
Um, but I think it's just, I think it's a balance too, because sometimes like we've had situations where I could tell our team was like, hey, get a little burnout on change. Like we need to step back. Sometimes you need a year or two of status quo. Everybody needs a time where it's just the same old. But really just making that a part, it just is the culture. Like we're bringing ideas at all of our staff meetings. We're talking about, hey, is this still working? Reevaluating things and um, just making that a part of the everyday idea of what we do at Big Brothers Big Sisters. And we can't, we work with kids and volunteers, and their lives are rapidly changing. I mean, I myself have a 9 and 11 year old, and I'm like, what in the world? Or like their language is different, everything is different. And so
Right.
if we're not open to change, we'll become irrelevant very quickly.
I know that reminds me of kind of my age as well. The other day, my son's getting ready to go to Georgia Tech, and one of his
Oh.
colleagues, one of his student friends, they were talking to a landlord, and the student sent a text to the landlord and said the apartment was really sick. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
does that mean he doesn't like it? And he was like, no, mom, that means he really likes it. So you're right.
Yep.
So I think change is here, right? And change is with us and being open to that and embracing it. But also, I like the fact that you said sometimes you have to throttle back. And I think
Mhm.
that's the role of the leader to have that observation with their team, to be connected with kind of the pace and capacity of their team to know when to throttle back. So kudos
Yeah.
to you for doing that. Talk a little bit about managing risk for failure, because when you step out boldly, that's one of the fears for a lot of leaders is if I put in this bold strategic plan or if I set forth to do this, there's a possibility of failure. And so how do I manage that?
Yeah. I mean, I think internally first I have to be okay with it so that I can express that to my team that if some pieces of this may not work and that's okay. And I mean we that's just something we all have to admit. And I think we as a culture have gotten better about that. Like we're going to fail, we're going to make mistakes. I also think one of the beautiful things about the planning process is hundreds of ideas came out of the strategic planning process. We ended up with more than a couple, but we ended up with a much smaller amount than ideas that were brought to the table. So it's really easy if something doesn't work, we have other things to pick up off of all of our packet of research and all of our ideas that we can say, "Hey, let's try this instead." And so I think just not getting to a point where if one of our deliverables, one of our action steps doesn't work, we just go, "Okay, well that whole goal is out the picture." Okay, well maybe this method for us, one of our big areas of course is our enrollment process for volunteers and recruiting. If one of the ideas we have is a failure, okay, well, it's not the only idea we came up with. And so just being like making sure I'm okay with it. So then when I'm talking to our team or they're presenting to me that something didn't work, then we can encourage them through that and push to the next step instead of just feeling defeated.
Right. I think, what you're talking about there, where first of all, it's a mindset that you bring to the team
Mm-hmm.
and know that, it's okay, right? We're going to
Mm-hmm.
try this and you nurture that. And then you say, we're going to shift if we need to. I mean, So much literature is out today in terms of business leadership and the importance of being agile, the
Mhm.
importance of like this test and iterate type of culture. And what I'm hearing you describe around failure is instead of thinking of it as pass fail,
Yeah.
you're thinking of it as test evolve, so that you're in this constant agile way of really continuous improvement.
Hmm. Yeah.
So you're learning and you're evolving rather than, starting off with a pass fail or success and failure kind of viewpoint. So, and that that's empowering for the team, right?
Yeah.
Because if they know that they can try something out, learn from it, and then go and iterate it to the next level, that's very empowering.
Yeah. And if COVID taught us anything, we all learned to be agile. And
That's right.
so we should all be experts in that at this point.
That's right. If there was a silver lining there.
Yeah.
Uh, when we think about your work going forward, talk to us a little bit about, kind of what's shaping your work going forward, this new, viewer perspective, human-centered
Mhm.
perspective. Um, what do you see ahead?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is always just because we get paid to do this work doesn't mean we're the constant experts in it. And just always being willing to look at it from our volunteers' perspective, our parents' perspective, our kids' perspective, other constituents, other stakeholders, whether it's a donor, a board member, partners in the community like yourselves. It's we can kind of just drill down on our problems or stumbling blocks and be like, hey, no, let's ask for other help. Let's do a survey. Let's get a group together and kind of get feedback from them. I think just carrying that mindset into everything we do will be huge in our work going forward. And outside of that, I mean, we're just really excited about the feedback that came from everything. Just looking at how can we make our mentoring experience the best it can be for our bigs and our littles and our parents, because that's what's most important to us in the end.
Right, right. I love this concept around kind of deeply listening, right? Sort of
Mhm.
not taking for granted that you really understand their perspective, but taking a moment, like you said, to survey or meet with them or listen. I remember one of the Harvard Business Review stories that we use often talking about how CEOs need to stay connected to their customers is when
Mhm.
the new CEO of Levi's came into play, that Levi's brand was struggling. And this was a past part of their history before he came on board. And he actually said, no, I don't want to just see the data from our customers. I want to go meet with
Mhm.
our customers. And
Yeah.
he sat down with him and he said, why do you wear Levi's?
Yeah.
What makes you feel special? And I think that level of intimacy, it's not something you have time to do every day. But the
Mhm.
fact that you're saying we have to be intentional around continuing to listen to our customers and to our stakeholders so that we're not going forward with assumptions
Yeah.
that might not be well founded. So great lessons from you today, Jessica. Thank you so much for joining us. Seth, I would just ask, are there any questions that came in from the live audience that participated in today's session? Don't think I see any. No, I think not. So thank you so
Okay.
much, Jessica, for joining us today. We always ask all the leaders who join us at Leaders in the Arena for any advice that you would share for leaders generally as they're engaged in the business arena today. Anything that you would share?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing that we kind of reference throughout is just the culture. Like, you got to have a great culture within your business, within your organization, a safe culture before you can have a really good quality strategy and really do quality good work. That it has to be a safe space where external clients, customers, volunteers, and your employees can feel safe in bringing up their ideas to the table. That's the biggest piece that I try to I try to keep. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but try to make that a continual piece of our what we do.
You're amazing. Thank you so much for your leadership in our community, for your leadership with Big Brothers Big Sister, and thank you for your team. It's been a pleasure teaming with you. Is there a way that people can stay in touch with you if they have questions to follow up?
Yeah, I mean, of course, find me on our website. I'm on LinkedIn and all the socials under Jessica Whatley. And would love to connect with anyone.
All right. Thanks, Jessica. Have a great week ahead. Appreciate you being here
Thanks.
today.
Thank you, Jenny.